Who's still sitting from last time?
In case you want to refresh your memory, you're good to go. Are we doing the water board first?
All right, I'd like to call the town council meeting into order. If you can please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before Councilman Marker reads the names of the officers that have been killed since our last meeting, if we can just please have a moment of silence for Fire Chief Bill Timmer, who had passed away yesterday, and he was from Highland. Thank you. Mr. Marker?
Deputy Marshal Barry Bigelow of the Ville Platte Marshal's Office, Louisiana, end of watch Monday, July 31st, caused death gunfire. Sergeant Pedro Torres Santos of the Trejo Alto Municipal Police Department, Puerto Rico, end of watch Monday, July 31st, caused death gunfire. Police Officer Jonah Oswald of the Fairway Police Department, Kansas, end of watch Monday, August 7th, caused death gunfire. Firefighter Benjamin Charles Sapper of the United States Forest Service, Medford, Oregon, last call August 4th, cause of death, vehicular collision. Pilot Tony Sosa of the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, Sacramento, California, last call August 8th, cause of death, helicopter collision. Captain Timothy Tim Rodriguez of the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, Sacramento, California, last call August 6th, cause of death, helicopter collision. And Assistant Chief Josh Bischoff of the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, Sacramento, California, last call also August 6th, cause of death, helicopter collision.
Do we have an opening to a pastor today? Opening prayer?
No, sir.
Okay. We have the roll call, please.
Councilmember Jim Marker,
Present.
Councilmember Larry Balla,
Present.
Council President Rick Rifa,
Present.
Councilmember Melissa Robbins,
Present.
Councilmember Tony Hobson.
Present.
Right, each member has received a copy of the August 1st minutes. What's the pleasure of the council?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Could we have the claims, please?
Claims totaling from various funds, $1,971,755.99.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Could we have the announcements, please?
We have one announcement this evening. The next town council meeting will be on Tuesday, September 5th at 7 p.m. There will be a study session before the meeting at 6:30, and one will follow if necessary.
Thank you. Do you have any communications? Reports, police? Fire?
No report.
Building commissioner?
No report, sir.
There's no finance report. This time we take public comment on any of the agenda items. Anybody have a comment or a question on any of the two agenda items that we have right now? Yes, sir.
Good evening, members of the council. Good evening, members of the council and all others present. My name is James Yannikopoulos. I'm with the law firm of Karansky, Bauer, and Paraki PC, and I represent 501-525 South Colfax LLC, Colfax North-1045 Reader LLC, and Octagon Corp., all three of which filed written remonstrances with respect to Gene Bergman's request for 1033 Reader Road rezoning from I-1 to R1. And those remonstrances were filed with the Plan Commission on this matter, and which were orally remonstrated at the Plan Commission meeting. And we would respectfully request to continue our remonstrances and create the proper record with respect to this spot zoning issue that has become evident. When dealing with rezoning, the town of Griffith is governed by Indiana Code Section 36-7-4-603, which provides that when dealing with rezoning, the legislative bodies shall pay reasonable regard to 1, the comprehensive plan, 2, the current conditions and character of the current structures, and the uses in each district. 3, the most desirable use for which the land in each district is adapted. 4, the conservation of property values throughout the jurisdiction. And 5, responsible development and growth. If I may approach the council, I have some exhibits that I would like to share just to demonstrate what is going on with respect to this property. May I approach?
Sure.
The first two exhibits deal with a zoom of the area in question, and then a larger copy of the map.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President Wright, for the record, I think it'd be best to mark these as remonstrators exhibits 1 or 2.
Okay, we'll use the first one handed out, which is just the coded one. And the second one has the actual, some great stuff in there.
The next two exhibits will be GIS maps with regards to the Colfax North-1045 Reader Street LLC properties. I will mark these as exhibits 3 and 4.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Exhibits 5 and 6 will be with respect to the 501-525 South Colfax LLC properties.
this 6?
Yes.
And the last exhibit. And the last exhibit will be Exhibit 7, which has the octagon court property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, if we look at the closer up map, we'll see that the subject parcel is next to a long industrial strip, which is owned by my client. Colfax North 1045, Greener Street LLC. This would be the long strip right here. The property was here, and then there's industrial property going around it in Exhibit 4. So you can see this is Exhibit 3, and this is Exhibit 4. And the property right here, smack dab in the middle, which would be creating a view of industrial property surrounded by, excuse me, if this rezoning were to pass, you'd have an island of residential property surrounded by a U property of industrial property. And my understanding at the plan commission meeting was, well, for some reason, this slipped past the goalie when they did some spot zoning originally years ago. As you can see, there's already a small island of R2. So what difference does it make if we just add another R2 to this larger property that's already been zoned as I1? And the question, though, rhetorically goes back, do two wrongs make a right, or do two wrongs make the situation worse? And do those two wrongs justify the inapplication or inconsistencies with the statutes which govern this situation? As noted, the first issue is, let's look at the comprehensive plan. If we look at the larger map, which was contained in Exhibit 2, you have large swaths of industrial area contained within what we'll call a large portion of the southeast portion of this town. Now granted, a while back when we were not involved in this case and in this situation, there was a small island that was zoned off of R2. But as we can see, even that small island is inconsistent with the plan and the path of development. Because if you look at the GIS maps that I have provided, the GIS maps confirm that the path of development for this area is industrial. And my clients have made a significant commitment to the town of Griffin to bring employees to this area, to bring industry to this area, and to abide by the zoning that was previously in place. If this spot zoning is allowed to occur, it would be inconsistent with the town's plans for this area. Because this area, as you can see, contains large swaths of industrial area. And the last thing we want is some sort of spot zoning where you allow people to basically say, okay, we have a house from 1860. Eventually, the goal was that the lifespan of that house would eventually fade, and then the path of development would allow for additional industrial use in that area, which is already zoned. If this rezoning is allowed to occur, you're essentially saying, we're okay with having spot zoning. We're okay with having an island of residential property so that that house can be torn down, a new house can be put up, and this perpetual coming to the nuisance problem arises. Because now, all of a sudden, you said, well, this was zoned industrial, but people are coming to the nuisance, and then they're gonna complain, well, this industry is doing this, and this industry is doing that. We can avoid those problems, though, if we confirm the comprehensive plan that calls for this entire area to be industrial. The current conditions and character of the current structures and the uses in each other district, perhaps at best it's a toss-up. We know that there's already other houses adjacent to that, and we also know, though, that the path of development is calling for industry to come. On that same block, you can look at the GIS maps. The industry is coming. It's already surrounded it basically on the edges of this block that is the subject of the rezoning, and we would hope that that path of industrial development continues. The most desirable use for which the land in each district is adapted to. Well, this is adapted to industrial property. There's heavier industrial property zoned to the north. There's railroad tracks here. And what you have is an old area of houses that eventually the town, in its prior wisdom, envisioned would be encompassed within an industrial park area. That industrial park area is here. It's expanding. The question is, will you allow it to continue to expand, or will you create issues potentially with spot zoning of another island of residential property? The conservation of property values throughout the jurisdiction, and this is the most serious issue, because if this rezoning is allowed to occur, my client has industrial property on this parcel of land, and in essence, the rezoning would make that land useless, because he'll be having to deal with R2 property here and R2 property. Perhaps we can deal with the spot zoning that already occurred here. But if you block them on both sides, then this parcel is rendered worthless, as shown in Exhibit 3 of the GIS maps. And the final issue, responsible development. The question is, granted, there's a house there that already exists. According to the assessor's office from the county assessors, that house was built in 1860. Eventually, that lifespan of that house will come to its natural conclusion. And the path of development for this area is an industrial area. My clients have committed their resources and have had a wonderful relationship with the town of Griffith. And we'd hope that this spot rezoning doesn't occur, because we hope that the town of Griffith can appreciate my client's commitments to improving the industrial area that it bought with the understanding that it was zoned industrial. And for these reasons, we respectfully disagree with the Plan Commission's recommendations in light of these 5 factors. And at the end of the day, we respectfully object to the spot zoning, which courts have stricken down and which my client may seek to challenge in court if this rezoning is passed. The most desirable use for the land in the area is industrial, based on its location in the town and based on the existing uses in the area. The uses in this area are industrial, not residential. The residential traffic and the residential uses will not be compatible with the industrial uses in the path of development currently. The rezoning of this property to residential would allow this property to remain residential property permanently, and that will devalue the surrounding industrial parcels. Having a residential parcel next to an industrial parcel permanently will create ongoing conflicts in this area, and the industrial uses will not wish to be next to an incompatible residential use. The remonstrators respectfully request that this spot zoning be rejected because responsible development and growth would not allow residential zoning next to industrial. The town has already determined that this entire area should be industrial, and it is developed in a manner with the industrial uses on the surrounding parcels. The remonstrator relied on those representations from the town and located its businesses there and has invested significant funds in employees. And it employs numerous people from the area and its businesses. It would not have located here had it known that the town would attempt to rezone parcels from industrial to residential in this area that will unnecessarily generate conflicts and perpetuate incompatible uses with possible accidents involving the residents and the businesses and industrial uses. Responsible development and growth necessitates that this entire area be industrial as the town of Griffith planned, and it should not be spot zoned to residential. The adjacent parcel to the west should be rezoned to industrial by the town to continue this area as a light industrial area, and therefore the petition should be rejected despite the recommendations of the Plan Commission. As indicated, all the criteria set forth in Indiana Code Section 36-7-4-603 necessitate that the petition be denied, and the evidence and the law indicates that proposed zoning in this petition should be given unfavorable ruling and rejected. I thank you for your time. If you have any questions or comments, I can address them now or later as the board wishes.
Okay, does anybody from the council have any questions?
I do. Your client is wishing the property under consideration to remain I-1, and he wants the adjacent R1 to also be changed to?
At this point, we can't do anything with the adjacent, I believe it's R2.
R2?
But
Is the fact that these two residences, or one residence even, is that impeding any work or production in the I-1 facilities?
my understanding is that my client has the I-1 facilities next to this property, and he is uncommitted to future development and is questioning what he should do on this side of the street.
You didn't
based
answer
on-
my question. I said, right now, you have an R1, or R2, whatever, a residential
Correct.
zoning right there. Is that zoning of that current house impeding your client from conducting business on any of his surrounding properties?
That particular rezoning, no, but if it's gonna be combined with this additional rezoning, then we're gonna have some serious problems, because that first parcel that I showed you on that GIS map is gonna be completely isolated. And you're gonna now have, this parcel basically surrounded by a U industrial parcel. And we have significant land that we'd like to develop on this side of the street. My client has committed to both sides of the street and to developing this I-1 area. But if this, in light of this petition, we're uncertain as to where we're gonna go now.
Was your client aware that the property in question was up for sale just within the last couple of weeks? Did he know that?
Our understanding that this was always the goal. The goal was to sell the property, but we never understood, well, if you wanted to sell the property, it's still a non-conforming use. The non-conforming use can still allow this house to be sold as a house and to be occupied as a house. You don't need the rezoning, though, to have the house purchased and continue to be used as a house.
I think you do to get it financed.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's, we're not gonna debate that part of this,
The appraisal's held up on it.
but,
Well, if your client was aware that this property was for sale, and he's that concerned about residential being in his area, did he make an effort to purchase that property?
I can't comment given the recent state of the sales. I don't know all the details. I'm unaware of the situation, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I have different questions, Larry, but I don't know if you're done.
Just one more. You mentioned the past wisdom that, created this industrial parks and surrounding this one residence. I wasn't on any of the boards back then. I think this is back in the 80s, 90s, 70s. I have no idea of what thought process they went through. But how do you know that a future town council, plan commissioner, whatnot, considering that the R1 to the south of that I-1 property is developing as residential, might not want to come back and rezone the entire industrial as residential?
Well, then that would be directly in conflict with what the town's position has been since the 70s and would negatively impact my client who has spent a significant amount of money to bring improvements to this area.
I'm not saying we're going to do that. I'm not saying it even came up, but who knows? I mean, this original zoning was done 50 years ago.
But what you propose then, if you accept this, you potentially open the door to that slippery slope and creating uncertainty in this area.
Is it, the gentleman that owns the property, in Exhibit 4, he's got current businesses on that property operating every day, correct?
Correct.
It's almost completely built out, correct?
There's the property to,
I know that this property is not built out, but I know he has this property that can access that property, okay? So in Exhibit 4, everything that's built out, I mean, and I'm not saying, but he's almost completely built out in this property operating next to a residence right now, currently. I just want to make sure that that's, I'm correct, and for the record, and I believe almost every parcel is already built out except for this piece back here and the strip he bought to be able to access that back property, I'm assuming.
and my client could have potential interest in purchasing this property. But with this pending petition, we're leaving a lot of uncertainty whether it's worth it for my client to purchase this property so that he can have a nice squared off parcel.
Well, I think that's the quandary we're at too, because, we are a democratic society, of course, and that's one of the most beautiful things about the United States. He had every opportunity. A year ago, the property on one side, the west side, was available. Now the property on the east side is for sale. Being a democratic society, he had every chance to say, hey, let's talk before you go to a realtor. Here's what I can offer you, and then go back and forth. That just didn't happen. I mean, we're talking about investing in the area, and, I get your position, but if he was investing in the area and he had the same foresight, then he would have came and said, you know what, let me talk to him first, let me get a conversation started. Then he went with the other gentleman and said the same thing. That didn't happen. They're right there, we're gonna ask them. And to me, that's my biggest concern. And I get your client, where he's coming from, but the bottom line is that he didn't make any forward movement to back up what you've been saying for the past 10 minutes.
Well, I think the improvements that my client has made in the area speak for themselves. And I'm not privy to those conversations, and I'm not privy to whether the other side was asking too much. I don't know. There's a lot of speculation, and if the house was on sale and on the market for such a relatively short period, part of the problem that my client has is this petition is pending. And my client can't necessarily deal with it until this petition is resolved one way or the other.
Anybody else have any questions?
No, I spoke my
Okay,
piece.
I have a couple questions, or a couple comments, I should say. You had referred to the comprehensive plan, and I apologize, we don't know the exact time or date that was done. That could have been in the 90s. We've had a couple updates throughout the years. And you referred twice or several times to two rights don't make a wrong. There's obvious errors in that comprehensive plan that we've corrected as a council over the last decade plus. When it was written, Griffith was a different community. Our housing market was nowhere near what it is now. And that relates back to one of your points where what's the best, highest value of the property essentially. Right now, as a home, it's considerably higher than what it would be as an I-2 or I-1. Your client had the opportunity to purchase that as a home, and I don't believe if if he would have, if that transaction would have went through and you were the current owner of that home, I don't believe the petitioner asking for the rezoning would be here today. I would assume that would have been dropped, and that would have all been taken care of. So there was an opportunity available to remedy the situation on your end, to purchase it, but in your own words, we should try to maintain the highest value of the property. And right now, the purchase price of that home was probably less than what, or much more than what may have been offered by your client. I don't know that, but that appears to be what it is. So that's an issue that we've had, and just, like I mentioned, when you also mentioned that, you know, we're gonna do a spot zoning that's gonna create a problem, that your client would not have purchased that property if he was aware that was gonna happen. There is a pretty good history, again, in the last decade plus, of us revising or actually going against the comprehensive plan that was created many, many years ago, several, or at least a couple decades ago. And that's been done up and down Broad Street, in similar areas where it was, instead of I-1, it was set to go to a B1 or B2 district from the residential. We've corrected those on spots, and it's been very successful. Our housing market has taken off, and you can go up and down Broad Street and look at the property values that have gone up for residential homes. That's because we've allowed the residential homes to remain. Same thing on Reeder Road. There is a history of, I don't know how many years ago, but the property that was zoned from I-1 to R1 or R2 happened. And that there's a history of that. So to state that you bought the property with not knowing that it would ever go back to R1 or R2, that's just wrong, because it's already happened and we've proven a history of that. So, and if you'd like to comment, that's fine, but just wanted to make that statement.
I can appreciate that. The problem that we have, though, is now all of a sudden we have a block along Reeder Road where you have the bookends of that block already industrial, with industrial uses in there. And then in the middle, the path of development is likely to be to eventually get that whole block with the, who knows what happens with it, our R2 property already. Maybe that gets bought out, and then we get come back and we rezone it.
Okay.
But there's some inconsistencies on that block because you've got two bookends with industrial uses.
And maybe the path to development might be reverting back to completely R1. So, you know, gonna let the market take its course.
Correct, but if you look at the assessed values of those industrial properties at the furthest to the west, the industrial property, which I believe is in exhibit 5, if I'm not mistaken, this exhibit,
It's 5.
this is assessed at a much higher value than the houses. So if we're concerned about keeping the values up, you can look at the assessed value of this property and see.
Do you know what the assessed value is of that property, and what is
If
it?
I'm not mistaken, it was assessed at 490 something. I apologize.
Okay, no, that's,
I didn't print that out.
okay,
But it's significantly higher.
but that's a developed property.
Correct, but if we allow this industrial area to get developed the way it should, based on the zoning, we could have higher values to stake.
What is the total acreage of the house in question? 1 acre? Okay.
I believe it's 0.34 acres.
Okay.
But if that 0.34 acres is allowed to join with the vacant industrial park to north and the vacant industrial property adjacent to it, we'll have a larger area to develop for industrial use, which could create higher values and more jobs for this area.
All right, and I guess the last question, I know Mr. Bala had addressed it, and you said you weren't privy to it, but do you believe your client was aware that the property was up for sale?
If my understanding is that it just recently came up in the last week or so, I don't know how my client can react if we've got this petition still pending and we're uncertain what's
Okay.
gonna happen.
but I can't recall, and maybe Mr. Bala or Mr. Marker, was this discussed at the Plan Commission, and the property was up for sale at the time? I believe that was the case.
Yes.
Okay.
I think you were at the Plan Commission like 2 months ago.
His attorney stated that they were aware the house was for sale, and we should expect an offer in a day or two, an attempt to push the meeting further. That offer never came through.
All right, and just so we can get it into the minutes, if we can just, please state your name.
Gene Berryman.
Hey, Gene. Okay, anybody have any questions for him? I've got a couple of things. So you didn't, when did the house did in fact go up for sale, approximately?
It was middle of July.
Okay. And how long until you received any offers or entered into a contract?
I received 2 offers. It would have been a week and a half ago.
Okay, were they substantially the same?
Full price.
Okay. And that for to remain as a home, as far as you understood?
Yeah, there was an FHA loan. The FHA appraisal was on Monday, and they will not finish the appraisal until they get either a letter of rebuild or the property rezoned.
Okay,
But they cannot get financing,
okay, if you don't mind sharing, what was the offer price that,
$279.
okay. All right.
Point of clarification,
Yes.
is this mid-July of 2023 it went on sale?
Uh,
Okay, so it's still the pendency of this petition though, which
Yes.
is the questions as to what we can do. If the board would like to table this for 2 weeks, I can see if my client has any interest in the issue, but
It sounds like they've gone to contract.
If I may, the attorney that was here at that point, he understood what was going on. He stated that the offer would be there. It was not there. He knew that if your client if he would make me an offer, we could potentially cancel the rezone. But there was no communication to me. There was no offer. There was nothing. So they had an opportunity for me to drop the whole thing, but I was never even contacted.
All right. Mr. Estrada, do you have any questions of either party before we move
I
on?
have no questions for either party. Only a statement based on the recommendation of council for the industrial owner requesting a tabling of this to allow his client to put in an offer may be construed as this council interfering with a private agreement and open it up to potential litigation.
Understood? All right, any other comments? All right, we will move on to our agenda now.
Mr. President, the first one.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a vacancy currently on the park board? I'd like to make a recommendation for David Rodriguez to fill that position.
Daniel.
Daniel.
I'm sorry, Daniel Rodriguez. Need my glasses.
We have a motion to appoint Daniel Rodriguez.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion carries. New business, findings of facts for 1033 Reeder Road.
I have that. To the Griffith Town Council, please consider this communication as certification that the duly advertised public meeting on July 17th, 2023, the Griffith Plan Commission unanimously passed a motion to make a recommendation to the Griffith Town Council to rezone the property located at 1033 Reeder Road from I-1 to R1. The Plan Commission considered the following, passing the motion to be recommended the rezoning of the property to the council. 1, the commission determined that the town's comprehensive plan was outdated in light of the remarkable changes that have taken place concerning real estate development within the town's corporate limits. Unfortunately, the old comprehensive plan does not address these changes. Further, the plan did not take into consideration that there was a 100-plus-year-old house residence on the subject property. 2, the current conditions of the character of the structures are such that rezoning of the subject property where a residence has existed for well over 100 years will not interfere with the remaining property that is zoned I-1, since the town ordinances require a buffer zone between R1 and I-1 zoning districts. Further, another residence is in close proximity to the subject property, was previously rezoned to R1. The commission also took note that the recently large portions of real estate south to the subject property have been developed into residential subdivisions. 3, the most desirable uses for which the land in each district is adapted is such that the property within the 100-plus-year-old home on it clearly should be zoned R1, and the remaining property should remain I1. The building of the residential subdivisions in close proximity to the subject property must be considered in dealing with the most desirable use of the property. 4, there is no evidence that rezoning the subject property will not have a negative effect on the properties throughout the town. 5, the subject property was an existing residence when that area of the town was rezoned I-1, and in keeping with the responsible development and growth of the property, should never have been rezoned I-1. I make a motion that we adopt the findings of fact for rezoning from I-1 to R1 and authorize the building commissioner to enforce residents and such, and to author an ordinance that we can enter into at the next town council meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? So we're accepting the finding of facts. We will instruct our attorney to develop an ordinance that will be presented at the next meeting, which would officially make the zoning in place. And then our building commissioner is authorized to notify the participating parties that this is happening. So, any discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion carries. All right. At this point, before we go to public comment, we will go open up the water board meeting. So could we please have the roll call for the water board meeting?
Jim Marker.
Present.
Ray Bella.
Present.
Rick Rika.
Present.
Melissa Rivers.
Present.
Tony Hudson.
Present.
Each member has received a copy of the July 18th minutes. What's the pleasure of the council?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion carries. Could we have the claims, please?
So we have claims from the water board totaling $164,609.32.
I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. There are no announcements or agenda items. Does anybody have anything from the board that needed to discuss? All right, the water board meeting is adjourned. We'll go back to the town council meeting. This time, we will take public comment. If anybody has a comment or a question, just please state your name. All right, anybody have a comment or a question? Yes, sir.
I mean, I probably table it, for my, property, is there any way to get a letter stating that we're going forward with the appraiser?
Yeah, I think we've instructed the building commissioner
Okay.
to state what transpired tonight, basically.
So I'll send an email and get that over, I appreciate your help.
And our next meeting will be September 5th, which would, the ordinance would be eligible for adoption at that point, or at least introduction. Okay, all right. Anybody else? All right, the meeting is adjourned.